That was a long time ago. It must have been 1,000 or 1,500 years ago. There was a place called Athens in ancient Greece. Athens is not an unfamiliar name, everyone has heard of its name in history. In a small village surrounded by mountains in Athens, there was an old house in a forest. The house had been empty for a long time. It was a deserted mountainous area. The environment was surrounded by forests. It was abandoned. Even though there were no people, the house was not in a very dilapidated. But the strange thing is that the owner of that house, despite his 1,000 attempts, could not rent that hut to anyone for a long time. In fact, the hut, located in a secluded forest on a hill, had become quite infamous. Once, a peace-loving gentleman saw the hut and could not control his greed and came to spend a few nights in that hut for a vacation. But the next morning, the man's body was found lying in the hut's building. At first, no one bothered much about the matter. However, some suspicions were raised among those who saw his body. Because, even after death, there was an unusual fear in the man's eyes. And his eyes bulged out. But later, after a while, another soldier-like man came to that house to spend the night. The man was incredibly brave. That man did not die, but what was heard from his mouth about the night's experience was truly terrifying. After eating and drinking, he had just gone to bed at night when he suddenly saw a huge old man with a gray beard and a haggard face standing in front of him, his hands and feet shackled. A kind of mumbling sound was coming from the mouth of the terrifying old man. The soldier did not die of fear. But he had fainted. The next day, after regaining consciousness, he immediately left the hut. After hearing everything from the soldier's mouth, panic spread throughout the village. Even during the day, no brave man would set foot in that house. The hut was labeled a ghost house overnight. The owner of the hut used to rent out the hut and run his family. But from the moment the haunted reputation of the hut spread around, no one else agreed to rent the hut. Finally, the owner of the hut wanted to sell the hut for the price of water. But who would buy it? Who would come to die at the hands of a ghost for fun? Still, one agreed. The owner of the hut found a customer. The man was a famous philosopher at that time. Philosophers usually prefer secluded places. They like to analyze everything with logic and argument. This philosopher also heard about the slander of the hut from the people. But he did not want to believe in any miracles in his heart. He decided that he would go to the house and stay. He would destroy the irrational belief of fear of ghosts among people. He went to the owner of the hut and told him about his desire to buy the hut. The owner of the hut had found heaven in his hands. He had assumed that such a haunted house would never be rented or sold. So, hearing the philosopher's proposal, he fell from the sky. He also immediately sold the hut at a water price and sighed. As I said before, a philosopher does not live without logic. Why would he believe in something that cannot be seen with the eyes, touched with the hands, or understood with the heart? The philosophical gentleman, taking all his belongings, went to the house he had just bought. He spent the whole day arranging everything with his own hands. He had to do all the work himself because the house was so infamous that even with the greed for more money, he could not hire any servants. Anyway, after a whole day of hard work, the philosopher gentleman was quite tired. Although he did not feel like eating much, he finished his dinner with a little bread, meat and coffee. Then he went to sleep in his small bed. There was an old-fashioned window near his head. He kept it open. It was a hot day. In the cool night air, he turned off the light and fell into a deep sleep as soon as he lay down. Who knows how long he had been asleep? Suddenly, he was awakened by a strange sound and discomfort. It takes time for a person who is deeply asleep to wake up suddenly. It took the philosopher gentleman a little time to understand where he was and how he was. Then he remembered everything one by one. He had come to a new house. And this was his first night in a new house. Everything started to come to mind. He strained his ears and tried to understand the strange sound and discomfort. After lying there for 2 or 3 minutes, he realized that the sound was like the clanking of chains. But very faint. It was as if someone was pulling the chain from afar. The philosopher gentleman slowly opened his eyes and looked. Total darkness spread throughout the room. Only the sky could be seen through the window near his head. Of course, the sky could not be distinguished at that time. The color of the sky and the color of the room had become one. The philosopher gentleman did not quickly get up from the bed and sit up. He wanted to see what was going on. He also felt that the air in the entire room was still. A suffocating, stuffy atmosphere had been created. When a long time passed in this way, and the freezing darkness slowly descended, he suddenly discovered a vague shadow figure, shackled at the hands and feet, slowly floating. The shadow figure was waving its hands as if trying to tell him something. The two eyes of the figure seemed to glow with a burning fire. The philosophical gentleman was very brave. He did not believe in anything supernatural. However, although he was not afraid, a strange wonder overwhelmed him for a while. He tried to understand what it was. Was it a terrible monster or an evil person dressed up like that and threatening him? While lying down, these various arguments were storming his mind, when he saw that shadow figure, shackled at the hands and feet, slowly approaching him. Its eyes were still burning. It seemed to be smiling and waving its hands and feet as if trying to tell him something. And as he moved his hands and feet, the clanking sound of the chains also continued to make noise. Anyone else would have fainted from fear by now, or if he was weak-hearted, he would have died from fear. But nothing happened to this very brave gentleman. Instead, he just stared at the shadow figure as he was. In fact, he wanted to see what the figure would do next. With a face of a forest of beards and a head of rough hair, the statue seemed quite scary and terrifying. On top of that, its fingernails were quite large. Seeing the sharp and large fingernails on its hands, another kind of fear came to the philosopher's mind. He did not believe in ghosts. He had no idea how much harm a ghost could do to a person after death. He also did not believe that there were such unseen things in the world. He thought that a living thief harmed people more than a ghost. But now, what would he do now? He was thinking of ways to protect himself from possible danger when suddenly the philosopher noticed that the statue did not take a single step forward and kept retreating. He eventually left the room. Seeing the incorporeal statue retreating, the philosopher left his momentary stupor and got out of bed. Then he himself ran out of the house and stood outside. Whether the incorporeal statue was a ghost or a strange being, the philosopher observed with great astonishment, crossing the veranda and slowly descending. Then, going straight through the middle of the long courtyard, it suddenly disappeared like camphor. The philosopher shouted once, "Who? Who?" But in response, he heard nothing but a vague murmur from afar. Standing at the very place in the courtyard where the statue had disappeared, he thought for a long time, lost in thought. He called out twice more but got no answer. In vain, he went home and lay down. He spent the rest of the night thinking about this strange thing. As soon as the dawn broke, he came to the exact spot from which the statue had disappeared last night and began to observe many things with his observational eye. But during the day, he did not find anything unusual. This hut on the hill was quite far from the locality. On top of that, due to the reputation of being haunted, people and even brave men did not come within the 3 boundaries of this house. In this secluded and unfriendly environment, the philosophical gentleman again became engrossed in his studies. He remained immersed in the world of books almost the entire day. As a result, he almost forgot about that incorporeal and strange incident of the night. When he went to bed after eating and drinking, he immediately remembered the incident of the previous night. But he did not pay much attention to the incident. He wondered what he had seen in his half-asleep and half-awake state due to excessive fatigue and worry. Although he did not fall asleep as soon as he lay down on the bed, he fell into a deep sleep in a short time. Even though he